money.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Fishbowl Radio Network. This is Journey to Business with your hosts, Melissa Walker and
Jeff Camino.
We are very excited tonight. It's all about staffing, services, and recruiting. There's many of you out there that are looking for positions, that are looking to open up their own companies, and we're going to cover both sides tonight with a very special guest, Mr. Brad Stevens. Say hello.
Hello, thank you much.
All right, so before I go into what we're going to talk about a little bit more, I wanted to, again, thank you for tuning in. If you're live on Facebook or if you are listening over Fishbowl Radio Network, we appreciate you listening in and or watching. You can remember this is a show based on reciprocity, and what that means is that we want you to join our show. You can feel free to email us at j2bradio.com, www.j2bradio.com. There's an email address where you can send in if you want to send in referrals, questions, or anything else. Please feel free to. Or you can call in the show live at 214-431-5062. Again, remember that this is a show based on careers, so it's if you want to grow yourself, come on.
Your business.
Or your
career.
We've never done that together, so we were just practicing tonight for the first time. So, all right, so let's get a little bit more into what the show is going to be about today. I'm really excited to have Mr. Brad Stevens, who is a very seasoned person in the staffing and recruiting industry and other areas of owning business and that kind of thing. So Brad and I were introduced by, I believe it was Lawrence, correct?
Yes,
Lawrence Whaley. So thank
Whaley.
you, Lawrence, because he's been a great contact. It's all about networking out there. So Brad, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to discuss today.
Okay. Well, I have been in and around the staffing industry about 30 years. Was in printing for 10 years prior to that, and got recruited back into the industry by Norrell back when it was temporary help. Staffing didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
And most people didn't know why they'd ever need a temporary. So that has changed dramatically.
A little bit, I tell you what.
And pioneered a staffing program, a proactive staffing program for Norrell that is much different than a reactive temporary type of mode.
Yeah.
But in that process, worked for Norrell, and then got recruited away to Olston, did a turnaround in Dallas market for Olston, so took up this market that had been losing money for 10 years and turned it around to profitability.
Well, that's always a good thing.
That's always a good thing.
You know, I actually worked for a company that Norrell turned into.
Oh.
So it was like Norrell, and then there was Interim Technologies and Brandon Systems, and then it ultimately became Spherion, which I believe is now Randstad.
I think it is.
Yeah, so that's the dynamic of, staffing industry, is it all kind of engulfs itself. But yeah,
it does.
So we work for the same company, basically.
Yeah, we did.
But go ahead and continue.
Well, and then back in 91, I had the opportunity to open up my own firm, Staffing Services, Inc., which I took it from the kitchen table to the top 25 in the market.
It's like Steve Jobs here, everybody.
Yeah, well, not really. We're not retired. And had 4 locations here in Dallas plus Denver, and getting ready to domino out to 15 other markets when 9/11 hit.
Wow.
And flipped everything upside down, and we had to shut that business down and start all over again.
Funny, I'm actually going to be in Denver tomorrow.
Oh, Denver's a great place.
Yeah. I don't think I'll get a ski or anything, but I'm hoping.
Well, you might.
Yeah.
And then since then, over the last several years, I've been brokering other services as well as doing consulting and recruiting for companies, and then helping on a new business development side for multiple venues. So that's kind of a background for me, just in a snapshot.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but Mr. Tom Allen's on there, and he said hello.
Ah, hey, Tom.
he may be going to dinner now, but he at least came to say hi.
Well, I'm glad.
All right, well, that's definitely an interesting background. Tell us a little bit about the company you're working for now, though, because that's a little bit of a different twist. I want to hear about that.
It is. Signature is a back office solution for recruiting and staffing companies across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, Signature Back Office Solutions becomes the employer of record for anybody that is placed on assignment, handles all the payroll funding, billing, collections, insurance coverages, and takes full liability for the employee placed on assignment. So it lets the recruiting and staffing companies do what they really went into business to do,
right,
is find the right people for the clients and build their business. And then Signature handles everything else.
All the risk and all that stuff. Actually, Signature handles my back-end solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very convenient service.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's pretty unique. There are very few companies that do what we do at Signature, and it's much different than a PEO that many people have heard about.
I love it as a small business owner because, you're always trying to, whenever you're in the staffing industry, you have to pay payroll and you have to wait for invoices to get paid, and they take that risk for you. So that was like, okay, I'm signing up.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So, and Jeff, you fit in because you've been recruited, right? That's where you
Right.
get the staffing industry,
Yeah,
piece.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and it's always interesting to work with recruiters. What I like to do with that is the fact that they're working for you. They're on your side to recruit you just as much as you're trying to get your foot in the door somewhere. So.
As long as you fit the job they're looking for.
Well,
talk more about
you're
that.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they are. They are always, of course.
Yeah.
So, and that's a great lead in to what we're going to talk about today. So good job there, because this show is going to be all about staffing and recruiting. So it's either if you want to open up your own business and understanding what it means to, do that, and because it's a jungle sometimes, or if you want to work with a recruiting company, if you want to have an agency that's helping you, be recruited, what does that mean? How do you treat the recruiters? What are they doing for you or not doing for you? Like, what does that really mean? Because I think that there's a lot of confusion about that dynamic out there in the marketplace about, how do you work with a recruiter? Is it worth it? Like, is that, I don't want to work with a recruiter. I want to go directly to the company. But people, I think understanding that dynamic will be really important moving forward.
Well, and a lot of times the recruiting firms have opportunities that you would never see firsthand from the company.
Oh, exactly. I know there's companies out there, not naming any names, but there's some companies out there that just send all of their staffing to agencies rather than recruit it themselves, just because they don't have the internal talent to do the recruitment piece. So it's the only way to get into some companies. So
Yeah, at one point we had over 200 employees at one of the banks and 150 at another. So we were handling a large part of their recruiting and staffing.
yeah, a lot of major organizations actually like sub out like a whole piece of their staff, or their like send me their help desk or something else, to where there's only a company. They're the only ones who have access to get into that company.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you're wondering if you should work with a staffing company, the answer is yes. So let's talk about why that is and how you work with them. And the reason I say that is because I used to recruit in a staffing company, and you have the people out there that would like, oh, you're just a recruiter. And then they would be like so rude because they're like, you're just a peon or whatever. Can you say that on air? No, I'm just kidding. But, they're like, you're not somebody that we need to pay attention to. We need to talk to the company. So they want to skip over you like you're not important. But the reality is you're the gatekeeper. It's kind of like an admin or a security guard. You got to treat everybody kindly, right?
That's what I'd recommend.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you are the gateway or the gateway into that organization. And if you go on assignment, you're actually the employee of the staffing firm.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that. So
Right.
it's good to be good to your recruiter.
That's what the best way to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that process, it's you can tell a recruiter many things that you probably would never tell the end client, the company itself.
Yeah, that's true. There's a different dynamic there. I mean, because, you can, well, it's kind of like you always tell your doctor, lawyer, and recruiter everything, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be the ones taking care of you in the long run.
Yeah, really. I almost treat them like they're my agent. They're my advocate for me. They're helping negotiate the salary. They're, and it's to their interest as well to, help us with those things. So.
Yeah, you want them to like you, because if they like you, they're going to be working hard to find you something.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
In fact, that's what I was going to suggest that you had talked about. The recruiter's on your side.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember when I was doing recruiting just in a staffing industry, that I had a couple people that sent me thank you letters. And I would take those thank you letters and I would put them on my wall, like my little cube, at the time. And when I was out there recruiting, get a new position, the first thing I thought about was those thank you letters that were sitting in front of my face. So if I'm thinking of somebody I need to hire, I'd see those thank you letters and they would be the first people on my mind.
Well, and like you were talking about, if your attitude is not good with the recruiter, that is typically communicated to the client.
Oh, exactly. Oh, actually, I just don't even submit them to the client, or I didn't.
Well,
yeah, sure.
To be honest, because you can do that in the staffing
And all
side.
things equal, you got 3 or 4 great candidates. Who are you going to submit? The ones that are nice to you, or the ones that maybe are not treating you very well.
Well, because as a client, they look at how good of people you place.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you're measured.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so somebody's personality at a placement is going to be as important as anything. So you want to make sure you're placing friendly people, right? Somebody that
Well,
plays well in
sometimes
the
it depends on the
sandbox, or-
role. I'll be honest. Like if you get some roles, you want people that sit in the corner and don't talk to anybody, and that's good, for the environment. And sometimes you want the friendly, outgoing person. It really depends on the culture and environment.
Okay.
Just FYI, I mean that's from a recruiter standpoint. So
Yeah, but share all you can and be good and treat them just like you would want to be treated.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. So yes, be kind. No, so that's the cool thing about working with the staffing company too, is that their job is to really understand the environment and culture that they're moving you into. So to that point, be kind to them and those kind of things, but they're going to really truly understand the environment, if they're good recruiters anyway, that they're going to be putting you in. So it's they meet with the managers, they understand the environment and culture, and sometimes it's funny, they actually do it sometimes better than the internal recruiters do. Have you ever seen that? Have you noticed that?
Oh, most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because it's the rules are different.
Yeah, because it's important to get that good placement. Well, it really is both ways, but you get commission on it in one way.
We're motivated.
Yeah. So we just wanted to say hi to Nadia, Richard, and Melissa LaFleur, and Michelle Arrington. Thank you guys for joining in on the show. All friends. I love them all.
That's good. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I try to pay attention to that as we're talking at the same time. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the dynamics of working with a staffing company. So you mentioned they're working for you. Let's talk about that a little bit more. I've heard you talk about you've got lots of recruiter calls whenever you're, and you're just like, okay, next.
Yeah, right.
You're pretty happy where you are, but like.
They reach out to me all the time, and I'll entertain it. I'm an opportunist, just like, most people. And they also are reaching out because they realize that their business is a business of relationships. And
I was covering your back, by the way, on like that you didn't pay attention, but okay. That's good.
I pay attention. No,
Yeah.
I usually do take their phone calls or
no.
return them. And then a lot of times they're reaching out to me because they realize that I'm at a company where they're trying to place someone, and maybe I've had a past relationship with them or something, and so they're trying to leverage that past relationship to, get a foot in the door, maybe have me go down and talk to a recruiter and an internal recruiter and say, hey, this is an okay person. You might want to give them a little bit extra time, or the hiring manager, et cetera.
Right. Because from a consulting side, they'll listen to the recommendation.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're looking for a job, I'd recommend registering with multiple groups.
Yes, 100%. Never put all your eggs in one basket. 100%. And again, 100%.
Exactly.
I talk to people whenever I do like career coaching stuff, and they'll be like, well, I've got my information in and I'm doing an interview. So I'm like, so what else are you doing? Well, I'm just waiting to see what happens there. I'm like, well, good luck. That's not going to quite work out probably very well.
Yeah.
You might want to go ahead and keep working on that job, because it takes a full-time job to get a job. It really does.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. When I'm looking for a job or something, I usually have a spreadsheet and just the people I've talked to and when I talk to them and what their position availability is and all that. Yeah.
That definitely speaks to a project manager.
Yeah, it becomes a project.
But no, really, you should track all that information. I mean, there's nothing better. Like if you're out on the job market, you've got to prepare, and it takes a lot of work to prepare, and including like looking up what your focus companies are, what do you want to target, getting to become a referral. I mean, that's something that we talk about on this show a lot, is how to become a referral and doing all those steps to prepare as a job seeker. And part of that is, to your point, Brad, going to multiple companies that can help you get into those target companies that you're looking to get into.
Right. Well, and to the career seekers, the people
Yeah.
looking for jobs,
Right.
I'd recommend treat it just like you would think you'd need to treat it. Show up on time. Be dressed appropriately. Don't bring a friend to the interview. Don't bring your kids to the interview.
Don't have a security guard hold your burrito. That happened one time, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Like, here, I got to go to this interview. Can you hold my breakfast burrito for me till I get back? Not kidding.
Yeah, because we're, from the staffing and recruiting side, we evaluate everything.
Yes.
From the
Yeah.
time you call in to the time you show up to the time you leave the door, how all that works.
How you treat the admin, how you treat the security guard, how you're treating the recruiter.
Right.
It all pertains to it.
It all
so.
fits together.
So, when we're thinking about the, pieces of working with a staffing company, what would you say the main benefit is as an employee or a seeker, job seeker?
The main benefit is the jobs you're going to be talking to the recruiting firms about are live. So they're openings that they're trying to fill.
Right.
Secondly, you get a chance, especially if it's temp to hire type of approach, you get a chance to check out that company as much as the company's checking you out.
Which is very vital.
Well,
people forget that they have that ability. Everybody's like, are they going to hire me? But you got to realize that you're checking them out too. And that's a very important aspect of it.
Exactly. And if your pattern in your work history is you move from job to job to job to job, 6 months to a year to 2 years, that's not a good pattern on your resume. Whereas if you work temporary for a service for X number of years, then you basically have one employer, even though you've had multiple assignments.
Right.
That's a
I think
good
we
point.
see people do jump a lot more like in IT and certain things just because there's a lot more contracting work out there. So I don't know if we, but that is a great point that staying with the same company and doing that kind of thing is vital, I think.
Well, and at least the last ratio I've heard as far as people looking for jobs on the internet, literally about 3% actually find a job through the internet.
Yeah. So my recommendation is always if you're going to apply online, do it while you're out networking on your phone.
Yes.
Because that's going to be your best opportunity. That's the only time you need to spend on it.
Yes. Yeah.
The people say it's black hole, and I think we're going to actually have a show. I actually was thinking about this, about the black hole of recruiting. So how do you get past the recruiters in this ATS systems? I've learned recently a lot of myths about ATS systems in the black hole, and so I think it's important for people to understand what that means and why there's a black hole and how you get around that if you are applying. So that'll be a future show. Maybe you'll come on for it.
Okay. That'd be good.
So let's talk a little bit about, from a staffing company ownership perspective. Let's talk about a little bit about that. So I know we're going to kind of go into some pieces. What would you say? I know that there's some people I know recently that are looking to open up a staffing company. We know that we want to use Signature as the back office, by the way, but talk about a little bit about how you were successful in running a staffing company yourself.
Well, you get to work any 80 hours a week you want to work. And it's the most complex business I know because it's pure people.
Yeah.
On both sides of the picture, the client side as well as the managers you're working with, as well as the candidates and the staff. So it's the most complex business I know. But in that process, it looks easy on the surface, and then it turns to mud real quick underneath.
It sure does. It's a very complicated process. I want to tell a story because you just reminded me. So when I got hired in the staffing industry, I was a baby. I was like 20 years old, 21, I think, right at 20. And we won't talk about how many years ago that was, but last year.
A few.
Yeah, just last year. Anyway, so they looked at my resume, and I actually started off as an admin assistant. And they looked at my resume, and they saw that I worked for Texas Hamilton Youth Prison. I'd done volunteer work. And they're like, well, if you can handle doing that, you can handle the staffing industry. And that's how I got in the staffing industry.
Well, I'd agree with that.
So if anybody wants to know what it's like to be a recruiter, that tells you the story.
Exactly. Yes.
So, but go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
Well, and with that, you've got to be able to sell if you're going to open up your own business
Mm-hmm.
and know how to generate new client relationships. You've got to, and you need to have it capitalized in a manner that's conducive to getting past the front end curve.
Yeah.
That's probably
Being
the
able to pay
biggest thing.
people, number one, and
Right.
that's a huge cost.
That always helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and most people don't realize until they start doing staffing how much cash it takes. Because
Oh, gosh.
if you start doing a good job, and instead of having 2 or 3 people out, you have 20 people out
On
or 40
contract
people
hire.
out.
Yeah.
Your payroll goes up dramatically. Your cash flow goes out the window.
You're quickly in millions.
Because you've still got to pay not only payroll, but taxes, insurance coverages, and wait on the client to
And
pay
your
you.
invoices may get paid in 30, 60, 90, 120, whatever days. So.
Oh, I used to work with banks, and they used to take 60 days to pay just because they could.
Yeah, because they understood how the cash flow and capital.
Exactly.
They understand the value of money and how you can hold on to it.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, and if you have a bad debt,
Somebody
just be
like that one,
aware.
they know what we're talking about. I think that was
If you have
Tom.
if you have a bad debt, you need to be aware and have a cushion set aside for bad debt because
Yeah, I still have some invoices out there from quite a few companies. Before I used Signature, by the way.
and I recommend that. To anybody jumping at. That's where Signature is a completely different option for somebody starting up
Yeah.
because we handle all of that cash flow for you.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's such an amazing service. We can go on and on about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about it too. So talk a little bit more about the success. You talked about the sales piece. Let's talk about that and how that really is such an important piece of the ownership of the company, because I think in any company, sales is what priority, right?
Unless you can drive revenue, you're not going too far.
And I tell you what, you can't just sell anything to sell in staffing.
Exactly. Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, you need to find out who the decision makers are.
Mhm.
And that may or may not be human resources. It may be the end client, maybe the actual supervisor or the department head.
And you're
or
lucky if it is, by
VP.
the way. You get a lot more business that way.
Well, you do. And you need to know what they're looking for. which may look different than the job description and job specs you get.
Oh, it always is.
Yeah,
Always
it's
is.
amazing.
Especially if it's a government contractor, but that's another story
Yeah.
in itself.
Now, is that what you found, Jeff?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of times a disconnect, because somebody's hiring for a certain position, but by the time it gets written up in HR, it's been reworded to some kind of HR legalese or something. And
Legalese, there we go. Yeah.
it's not the same thing that they're looking for.
Well, and HR typically needs to live in the black and white,
Mhm.
whereas I've always said the staffing world works in the gray.
I'm the grayest HR person you'll ever meet. I just have to say that. Like, how can we do it legally?
Yeah, you want to keep legal.
Yeah,
keep
I'm
in
always-
compliance.
My thing is like there's different kinds of HR. Just kind of have to defend us HR folks because I used to always say I was the cool part of HR because I was in staffing because you have to have a good personality in staffing. You have to have that kind of sales mentality, but you also have to be compliant. So you got that mixed personality. So it's the cool part of HR because you're not just the black and white. Not that there's anything wrong with that because we need them too.
Oh, absolutely.
But the gray area is very important because there's the old way of HR where you're just the annoying governing body. And then there's the new HR, and this is where I find myself being, or personally, I think is the cool one, because it's not that we're going to tell you, no, you can't do it. We're going to tell you how to do it and how to do it legally.
Well, the other part that's critical is,
We care about the business need.
well, we do care about the business need. The other part that's critical, in my opinion, and the difference is when we end somebody's assignment, they're not terminated from the staffing firm.
Right.
They can be placed at another client very easily, and they don't lose the continuity of work. Whereas if you're terminated at the company as a W-2 employee, then you're starting over again.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when they call for that reference to just verify employment, by law, they have to say, yeah, well, they were done in June 17th.
And then the next question is, are they eligible for rehire?
Right.
Maybe.
I wish you could answer that way because sometimes I feel that way when I've let people go. Maybe it depends on their mood that day. No, just kidding. So, we've talked about this a couple times and I want to kind of go back to it is around, you kind of mentioned the recruiters working for you. And one thing that this kind of spurred up in my head is that that's true, they are. But if you're out there as a job seeker, I think it's important to also understand the recruiter's life. And so, and you can maybe verify this. So the recruiter and anybody that's really hiring, when they're hiring based on what the business need is. So as a recruiter, as an outside agency or recruiter on an inside agency, you always, I went into recruiting because I love helping people and I wanted to find a job for people. And when I first started, I used to submit that same person to every job because I just wanted to help them so bad. And then you realize that you weren't helping them by doing that, but it's finding the right jobs for them. So the recruiters out there, they're looking, they know about a lot of opportunities, but you got to remember as a candidate, they can't place you somewhere that doesn't exist.
Oh, exactly. Well, yeah. And the recruiting agency is really working for the client.
It's
Contrary to popular,
both
they're
sides.
both sides,
Yeah.
but I've always looked at,
I have to train recruiters when I'm training them. I always kind of say, I know you want to help everybody, but you have to have the position to be able to help them.
right.
So you got to be able to explain that to candidates that you are working for them, but based on the criteria of the businesses that you're supporting.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you'll remember them.
But you remember. And the more information you give them as far as your history, your work history,
Mhm.
the better off you are with a recruiting firm or a staffing firm.
hmm
Because they may see something in your background that you may be far back, but you at least are familiar with that particular industry or company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which you may not do when you're applying for the job directly. So that's the other thing in interviewing. There's not a wrong answer to a staffing firm as much as giving the truth. Whereas it's much different than if you're interviewing directly with the end client company where you're trying to get that job.
Well, yeah, because the staffing company is going to teach you how to answer the questions appropriately with the client, how to talk through those kind of scenarios. And they're really not only helping you get submitted, but they're giving you the advice. They're like your broker. So, and I think you mentioned that earlier, Jeff.
Mhm.
That's truly
Kind of like a coach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting too because they're just trying to find a match. So they may know a little bit about the hiring manager's personality and they understand your strengths, and so they're trying to say, hey, speak to this because I know that person's going to be interested in that part of your resume. So make sure that you highlight that, and so they just kind of coach you through that piece.
That's such a great point because as you teach people how to network, and you think about this, when you're networking, part of the goal is to figure out what the person's need is. And with the staffing company, they're doing that for you. They know what the client needs, hopefully. No, but they know what the client needs, and they're teaching you how to find that in your background. So that's kind of helping you with that gap.
And a big thing too is they've actually they've sat down with the hiring manager, and so they've gotten rid of that legalese part, and they've actually had a conversation. So now they can kind of understand a little bit more in depth about what the position's really looking for.
Well, and the other thing that I used to do with our own company is a lot of times I would go work the job myself for a couple hours or half a day, so I'd know firsthand.
Oh wow, yeah, that's good insight.
Well, then you know firsthand what
I
they're
had to
gonna
do a data center job once. I learned how to do a data center.
Yeah.
I was a backup actually in case they ever needed one.
So you could say you could speak
Yeah.
to that position really well then, huh?
Yeah, they were interesting.
And that may be a question that
At
you're.
Visa, by the way, international.
hey,
I
there
know
you go.
all everybody's secrets. You better watch out.
Well, and if you're applying, if you're a candidate, ask the recruiter or the person at the staff company you're working with, have they been to the client location? Have they seen the job? Do they know what it really does?
That's
And they
good.
may or may not, but at least ask.
Yeah, that might give you an idea of just how hard they're working for you, or how hard they're trying to build those relationships. Yeah.
I'll
But those
be,
are just some thoughts.
yeah, I'll be honest. When I first moved into recruiting, I didn't know much about IT, and I was an IT recruiter. So my way of learning IT was by interviewing people. So I'd interview them about the job, but I was actually interviewing them to learn what the skill sets were.
Double dipping a bit.
And it
Yeah,
works.
it does work,
Yeah.
and because they're excited to tell you, and sometimes you even tell them, "Hey, I don't really know what that is. Can you help
Yeah.
me?" And people like to help people. So
Mhm.
it's kind of funny. I teach some recruiters that I'm like, if you don't know, just ask the question, and they think you're interviewing.
And you are.
Works great, but you are, yeah. You're learning at the same time. Hey, Trevor, nice to see you. Hopefully your friend's on too.
So I'm curious. It sounds like you need to build relationships with both the people who are looking for jobs and then also the clients that are, wanting the job seekers. Which is harder?
Well, I always viewed it as though I had two sets of clients. One's the client company that's going to end up paying the bill, but the other is the client employee, because they are as critical as anybody in the process. In fact, they're how you're going to be measured. So I always looked at both sides as a client.
How you're measured in a couple ways. I want to point that out because they're how you're measured if they stay at the company, but also how they speak about you as a company. how
And
you
if
treat
they're going to
them.
refer their friends to you.
Exactly. And you really want them to do that in a staffing company.
Yeah, because advertising and recruiting
So we want them to do it in
expensive.
every company. You always want referrals.
So
Right.
with that pipeline and supply and demand, is there one that's got a higher supply than the other, where you got a lot of candidates, not a lot of companies to place, or is it
It
vice
depends on
versa?
which kind of position you're working on.
It does, actually, very much so.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And you'll find that out real quick as you have a job, and you'll figure out that you're not the only one with that job assignment. If 4 other firms have it,
Right.
it's probably a hard to fill position.
Yeah, I know whenever I was in a corporate, if I was going to use a new vendor, what I would do is I would send them the hardest job we had to see if they could fill it. And if they could fill that, they would get past my screening.
Aren't you?
Now I hate people that do that.
Well, the other thing that we'll do working with a client is if their pay rate is off mark, then we'll advise the client that their pay may be too low to get the quality level of the person they're looking for.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely.
And I've had so many recruiters reach out to me with such ridiculous numbers, and I'm thinking that's why that client went to the, a recruiting agency, because it's just an unfair ask. They're asking them to go get a high quality candidate for nothing, and that just isn't fair.
Well, but that's where the recruiting firm should quickly figure that out
The good ones
and
can
then circle back.
consult.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a
Yeah.
consulting standpoint, yeah.
Yeah.
Figure that out and then go advise the client and then call you back and say, okay, now I think we're in your ballpark.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to do that from an internal recruiter perspective as well. I mean, you have to advise the managers like, hey, this is, and that's part of actually the job in HR is to benchmark based
Mhm.
on a couple of things. And hopefully some of that is actually in the candidate market, because sometimes benchmarks are just done from studies, which isn't always exactly accurate to what you're looking for. So,
Or it may be a U.S. average that doesn't fit your market.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, right, because it really varies from market to market a lot. Yeah, and I've seen guides where you got to adjust plus 2%, plus 5%, depending on where you are, et cetera.
Exactly.
Well, it's like, I need a project manager, and then the thing says, okay, project manager makes, and it's going to make up a number, $50,000 a year, which we know that it make more than that. But your project manager needs a PMP. They need to have this specific, Microsoft project or whatever tools, this many years of experience. So they're not going to fit that 50. They're going to fit this one, or this many years of experience. So there's always those kind of things to look at too.
Well, and that's where different than an internal HR department, there may be a lot of requirements to the position.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you start looking for the right candidate and you figure out they don't have all those, you may go back to the managing director and say, do you really need all of those?
Yeah, that's a conversation had every day, I think, is, okay, we know that there's the like to have, but let's talk about what we can have, like, or, what do we really need? And, or what can we live without? There's always that kind of conversation, because sometimes, you're in an organization, you have those people that have been there for a long time and they've gotten exposure to a lot of different things that company uses. But when they leave, you're not necessarily going to find somebody that has had that same exposure to all those things. So you have to have some flexibility and ability to train and be prepared for that.
Absolutely. One of the things, we run multiple on-site programs where we put a service person on site with a client, and we sit in their management meetings. And a lot of times, because we used to staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week type of positions, they want to create a shift that doesn't match up to reality. And so it's not hard to say, I know that looks good on paper, but it's just not going to work. You can't get somebody there at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
It's going to work till noon.
Yeah. And if you have a company that you're working with as a staffing company, if you're a hiring manager and they don't consult with you, you might want to move to another company, because you want somebody that's actually going to be honest and show you what's really realistic in the market. That shows the standard of the company I think you're working with. Would you agree?
I would highly agree with that.
Yeah. They don't give you pushback or advice, then either you're really good or
or if you've got a recruiter that's just sending you a lot of paper.
Yeah, that doesn't match anything.
That doesn't match anything. That doesn't save you any time as a client if you see 20 resumes that don't fit.
You might as well just recruit on them yourself, right?
Or find a new group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So real quick, actually, before I ask this next question, I noticed Trevor's on. I gave him a shout out. I want to also mention the show that Trevor Foster and Mark run. It's called Who You Know. It's a great other show. It's about careers, and they have a great referral network. I just want to make sure to give them a little bit of props, because obviously all of our goal is to help people get positions, understand how to move through, open up your own business, all of these different things. So it's good to work together and have different resources. So quick shout out to them, and just wanted to kind of point that out. So
good for you.
Yeah. That's our goal, is to help people. So hopefully everybody on is getting some help right now in some way or another. So let's talk a little bit more about Signature.
Okay. Signature, we support recruiting firms, independent recruiters, executive recruiting firms, staffing firms, HR consultants that put people out on assignment for clients, on contract, on temp to hire, on any kind of special projects of that nature. And in that process, Signature becomes the employer of record for those candidates in the eyes of the IRS. So it firewalls the recruiting firms and the HR consultants and those people against all the liabilities associated with unemployment claims, workers' comp claims, and all that stuff. Sean Powell, who owns Signature, is one of the best risk management guys I know in the country that I've ever worked with. He's also a wholesaler for workers' comp insurance, so he's got insights that most people never would have.
Yeah, and if people don't know this, whenever you're hiring people, there's a lot of risk. People are risk. So
Always.
It's good to have somebody take that risk for you and that liability. I know that we talked recently about a scenario with a client that we needed to put somebody out there with you guys, and they're like, well, why can't we just do corp to corp internally? And like, well, I can explain how that works and how that risk is there. And this is why you want to use a company like Signature to alleviate that risk.
Yeah, because unbeknownst to most people, even on a corp to corp or a 1099 basis, you still got liability for that individual and what they do. Or if
they don't pay their taxes, or right?
Well, not so much the taxes, but if they fall and hurt themselves.
Yeah, you got workers' comp issues.
You have workers' comp issues.
And if you treat them like an employee, they can. I'm not going to say this because I don't want to teach people all the secrets out there of what you can do, but don't treat them like an employee.
No, if they're contract, learn the rules of contracting.
Yes.
As the end company.
Yeah. I'll just leave it at that.
That's a good place to leave that.
Yeah. Like what you could do in California.
Well, and that's an interesting thought. Like one of our clients is Humcap here locally.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Tad.
McIntosh? Yeah, Tad McIntosh.
Great guy.
Yeah. Actually, Tom Allen introduced me to him.
Oh, there you go. Well, and for Tad's group, they handle everything internally here in Texas. But whenever they have a need in California, they turn to Signature to be their back office for California, so they don't have to go learn the laws, deal with the different rules that are out in California. So we can handle a piece or all of a client's back office solutions. And in that process, it works pretty smoothly. And then the other thing we do is as Signature pays the employee and pays the taxes, we also forward 100% of the gross margin dollars back to the recruiting firm each week, which improves your cash flow dramatically.
Yeah, because you're getting paid every week, even if the invoice isn't paid.
Exactly. And then Signature collects theirs on the back end.
Did you hear that noise? Okay.
A little bit of feedback.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. That's a huge value add, really.
And we handle everything from
It's amazing value add. Whenever he first told me about this, I'm like, sign me up right now. Because that was the biggest concern, because whenever we first started Next Career, we were like, okay, how can we do this? Because we can't manage. And there are some funding things you can do, but people, again, don't realize how much funding that really is.
Yeah.
And the risks and different things associated it, and how you have to set up the payroll and the CPA. I mean, there's so many things that go with it that are reduced by using a company like Signature that, I mean, I was so excited. But what we decided to do was just do full-time placements only at first to build that cash flow. But you know how long it takes to build enough cash flow from that way? Not a good approach, by the way. This is one of those new business owner learning curves that I had.
It helps to have the secondary income stream.
Yes, most definitely.
Well, and in that process, we handle everything from the typical administrative and clerical through all the way to medical, doctors, nurses, traveling doctors, IT, warehouse distribution, almost every skill level out there.
Just not movers. Just kidding.
Just not movers. There are a couple
Funny
of excuses. We don't do aircraft pilots.
Real quick, so yeah, oh, you don't?
No, they have different rules.
Please hold. Continue.
I'm glad it wasn't me,
everybody
Jeff.
not to do this.
So Melissa's
New
phone's
phone?
ringing. I'm just going to call her out right here.
It's my temporary phone because my other one got stolen and I forgot to turn it off.
He's
I
glad
don't know
that
how to
wasn't
use
me.
it really.
That's kind of frustrating because she always has her phone off, and I'm always telling her to have it on. And now she's going to be like, see, it's that one time that it rang and it shouldn't have.
Yeah. So I should always have it off. That's why. Side note. And I completely lost track of what I was going to say next. So next.
So I'm curious, what are some of the biggest challenges you have with your industry?
The biggest challenge is
Which one?
which industry? But the biggest challenge is if you fund everything yourself and do all your own insurance and everything, your biggest challenge is growing. Because as a client wants to give you more job orders, at some point you got to go get financing.
Okay.
And so you have to pass credit with the banks, or you turn to factoring, which is a whole different opportunity. But you're always worried about cash flow because the quicker you grow, the more cash you need.
Yeah, catch 22. Huh?
Yeah.
And by the way, tip as a business owner, if you need cash, get it before you need it. Because when you need it, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's very true.
Lesson number 2 of business owner right here. Okay. We grew past it, but
Yeah. Well, in fact, the other piece I'll give you just as a thought from a business owner standpoint, always sign with your title, any legal document you sign. Otherwise, unbeknownst to you, you have personal liability.
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Here's the corporate veil, right?
I need to look at our contract again. Hold on.
Yeah. Yeah, lawyers know how to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we have lawyers.
Yeah. But you need to build your team.
Yeah.
And it takes more than one or two of you to build a team,
Yeah.
and then grow it accordingly.
Yeah.
The challenge is always staying ahead of the curve and staying in tune. So if you have turnover internally, you don't lose the momentum you're starting to build.
You know, I'd say from the staffing industry side, some of the biggest challenges can be just simply the people. And I want to kind of go to this because I have some fun stories here. So I used to work in DC. I used to work there during 9/11. It was a really horrible time. But after 9/11, and I bring this up for a reason, we actually had a guy that, and it wasn't my placement, that threatened to blow up the IMF.
Really?
Literally. We had the FBI at the office. We had another guy that jumped off a bridge.
Oh,
We constantly got people that had backgrounds like, no, there's nothing there. And then there was a lot there. So that to me was always a challenge is people. People are, you got to be honest with your recruiters. It's always going to come up. So that would be my answer to your question.
Yeah, the other thing I would recommend if you're opening up a staffing firm, understand the place that you're going to be putting people on assignment and what the risks are, whether it's a safety risk for the employee or whether it's a financial liability that you don't realize you have. For example, I used to staff the lock boxes for the banks where all the cash is handled and money
small
orders.
liability there, I'm sure.
Well, it grows rapidly, as well as the cash vaults. The cash vaults are a whole different thing because you walk in and you see $250,000 laying on the table and you go, how fast can I walk out with this? Because I know you're going to be calling me to replace it.
That's not a good idea.
That's not a good idea.
No.
But there's a way to handle it. And you create hold harmless type agreements with the client. But typically that may be where we from Signature can help guide you in how to handle the risks, or even how to handle a client that doesn't have good credit. There's a way to support that client where we can still staff their business and handle the liability differently than you would think. So those are some things that we can add to, especially after 30 years in the industry. There's not much you can throw at us that we haven't seen.
Right.
So we've got a lot of listeners and people on Facebook. So if you guys have any questions, we're talking on both sides of the staffing industry, whether you're looking to find a position, you're looking to open up a staffing industry, or you're looking for some back office solutions. It's all about staffing, as we said. So if you have any questions, feel free to either call in at 214-431-5062. You can also send us an email at www.j2bradio.com. There's a button on there to send an email. Actually, like you don't send it on there, but there's an email button. Sorry, I can't remember the actual email address right this moment, so it's one of those days. Now, but if you guys have any specific questions, please feel free. You can also type it in on Facebook. Want to make sure that we are answering your questions, and we are brought to you live at Fishbowl Radio Network, Journey to Business. Had to throw that in there. So we only have about 7 minutes left of the show. So let's think through. We have an audience that's listening about staffing. What do you think the best advice to give them is, either as a business owner or coming from somebody who's on the market looking and work with staffing, or maybe both advices, please. On the spot, by
as
the
a
way.
business owner, if you're going to have a partner, make sure one of the two of you has 51%. Because 50-50 is a hard place to be. Everything looks good at the front end. But
better dance before you get married.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Once you get married, if it's 50-50, it's a hard breakup.
I think that a partner in a business is almost harder than a partner in marriage. The breakup can be very complicated.
You know, I love my wife, and I give her all the credit for still being around.
Yeah.
After 31 years, she's ridden through all the ups and downs with me. So,
that's amazing. Congratulations.
well,
by the
thank
way.
you. Thank her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Don't worry. I send a shout out to the wife of Brad Stevens. I've met him. I know what you're dealing with. Just kidding. He's awesome. I think Brad is amazing. So, and what other advice from the other side?
From the other side, from the employee side, the candidate side, know what you're looking for when you go in, whether it's full-time, part-time, day hours, night hours, or if you can only work a couple of days a week, that's okay. There's all types of part-time jobs out there. There's weekend jobs. So let the firm know if you're looking to supplement your income, if you're looking to find a full-time job.
Good points.
Yeah, just what's really going on with you, and if you have transportation issues, if you have child care issues, if you have kids you need to get to school in the morning, let the firm know that. That means you can't be at work at 7 in the morning typically, but you might can get there by 8:30 or 9.
Yeah, I've been in interviews lately, and I've had the candidates that came from a vendor ask that question. And I was kind of thinking in my head, they should have kind of covered that with the staffing company ahead of time, because that's, when you're actually in the interview, that's stuff that they could have covered with you, kind of thing, to reduce those kind of questions.
Well, and in my opinion, that's the responsibility of the staffing firm.
Yeah, true point.
To ask those questions.
Yeah, agree.
But if they don't, go ahead and tell them.
So on the point of knowing what you're looking for, I mean, that can be said for anybody who's on the job market. Know what you're looking for. So one of the things I always talk about is have a focus and broaden, but always know your breaking point. So what that means is you have what you will or won't accept, have a point where you stop, and know that ahead of time. This is all the pre-planning stuff. But also have a focus, so say what you want, but then broaden it to what you're able to broaden. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah,
so does that make sense to you too? Okay, good.
Sure.
If the two people here, hopefully our listeners understand it too. No, but
well, and a good example is, let's say you want to make $50 an hour. but you'll accept on a short term or a temp to hire basis, you'll accept 30 or 35 an hour
Mhm.
or whatever your numbers are. That's okay.
Yeah.
You'd
That's
be
a
better.
hard conversation to teach people to have, though.
Well, it is because they're afraid to tell you that.
Yeah.
And what it does, it more than anything, it opens up your opportunities.
Yeah. As I say, you focus and broaden, focus and broaden.
That's a good way to think about that.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
have what you're aiming for, what type of job you're aiming for. You know, that's one of the thank you, Trevor. He agrees it made sense. Sometimes I say things and I think they make sense, but they make sense in Melissa's land. So I always try to confirm with everybody else that it makes sense.
That's
So,
why you like that little feedback system.
heck yes. I'm going to like that later. No, but I lost my train of thought again.
Well, Jeff, since you've been on the candidate side, what are things you've encountered that would either bother you or that you liked?
Well, they reach out and, like I mentioned earlier, so the salary isn't even close to what is really good, and even that market. Before they've even had a conversation with me, they could probably have a conversation with 99% of the people in the same area, and they'd realize that it was just way too low. So that's always frustrating. Some of the other frustrating pieces. When the job description just isn't matching up, they reach out to me for example, business systems analyst, and clearly throughout my entire resume, I'm a project manager, program manager, and it's like, why are you reaching out to me? Or they're reaching out to me for a position in California, and clearly I've indicated that I'm looking in the Dallas market or something like that. So they just haven't even done any kind of homework whatsoever to even vet me out.
That's probably somebody new to the business.
It's funny too, though, because I'm thinking of like this is the lack of communication between because like the funny thing is we get people that apply that live in another state and then we're like, well, why are you it's like the complete opposite, like from
Right.
candidate side of that, and as a recruiter it's like, well, you never know what salary is till you ask sometimes, and if you have a client that's not going to budge, then you at least ask. So that's kind of why you get those questions probably. So now we understand each other. Recruiter versus candidate.
Well, I would say from a owner's side, if you're planning to open up your business, just know it's a little bit of life on the edge.
It's a fun life, though.
It is a fun life. It's a lot of freedom and it's a lot of responsibility, and you just need to put in the time and effort and work.
I'm not sure I saw the freedom part usually because I think I was working all hours. No, just kidding.
That's what I mean. You're free to work any and all hours you want.
There you go.
So the hours could be used however you'd like.
It's usually not 8 to 5.
I just want to say I love our listeners and Trevor, you actually got a like while on the show because he said in Melissa's land, it's awesome. And then Tom agreed. So thank you guys. I'll send you your rewards later.
There you go.
So talk a little bit about how people can reach you if they're interested in signature services or just want to talk to you about the staffing industry or.
You bet. The easiest way is two different things. One, my phone number is 214-213-6649. And then email is bstevens@signaturebackoffice.com.
As a man very confident and gave out his personal number here.
Yeah. And I answer the calls most of the time, or return it at least within 24 to 48 hours, depending.
He sounds so confident, professional too. You're always like so kind whenever he gets to the phone. You're like, this is Brad. It's exciting,
What else would you like to cover?
Oh, I'm done. That's good.
Okay.
So that's okay. So everybody, that's how we reach Brad and Signature. And so one real quick overview of what Signature does, and then I always ask for just one last key statement of something that you want to share.
The last overview is Signature becomes a strategic alliance partner with you. We're a known entity to the client, but we always protect your client relationship. Your clients are your clients. That's part of our relationship with you as a staffing firm.
And you're not trying to do staffing. You're doing this.
No, we don't do any
support.
recruiting at Signature.
Yeah. That was my first question whenever I started working with you. I'm like, well, are you going to try to take my clients?
No,
No, they
not at all. No, we've got an agreement that says your clients are your clients, and we won't intervene. But we will support you if you want us to go on meetings with you or calls with you.
And that's great too. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll coach you through and help you guide you through.
Yeah. And with your background and experience in the staffing industry, it's a really great value add.
Hopefully. Yeah, I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah.
That's good.
Check plus.
And then my thought for everybody out there is find out what you do best and do more of it.
100%. I'll let you know when I figure it out. Jeff, do you have any last final parting words for everybody?
So what are some of the more, just a quick question, what are the most rewarding things about your position and the things you do?
The rewarding part is it's always a pleasure and a joy to have somebody match up with a client in the right way. You've got a happy client, a happy employee that's got a job.
My favorite thing.
Those are
There you go.
those
Yeah.
are the most gratifying parts of the whole world.
I kind of thought that was going to be the answer, but that's, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure it's a great industry to be in.
Oh, it's a wonderful industry to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
think
it's-
making an offer on a Friday was always my favorite thing because you know that you made somebody's weekend, you've changed their life in a positive way. Like, it's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that
To add
does
to
that
that.
answer that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's a very rewarding business, very rewarding career, and I don't think it's ever going to change. In fact, the last stat I've heard is that 60% of all jobs out there by the year, I think 2025, are
Yeah.
going to be contract.
Yep.
That's a
That-
big number.
That's a big number, but that's what I've heard too. I've heard a lot of talk about that. What's the most rewarding thing as a candidate? Getting the job.
Landing the perfect job, right? Or,
Yeah.
getting what you're really wanting to look for.
Yeah. I know it's really good whenever you have a recruiter that you talk to and that you know that like if your job does end, like you said, that you can reach back out to them, they're going to help support you and then you keep that relationship long term.
Mhm.
So that's always good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We got Brad Stevens with Signature. One more time, your phone number and email.
214-213-6649, and email is bstevens@signaturebackoffice.com.
And before we close out, I keep talking about Jeff being an author, so I actually brought his book today.
Look at that.
So look, everybody, this is the book that Jeff wrote. So if you're interested, it's called Pray for Escape. Pray that you may escape. Sorry. That's not good. No, but pray that you may escape. So just wanted to share that with everybody. It's a really awesome book. If you wanted to talk about that, you wait to the next show because we're out of time.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
Brad.
Thank you,
Well, thank
everybody,
you.
for tuning in. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening. And remember, life is limitless. Are you ready to own your journey? And we'll see you next Thursday.
All right.
We still on?
Hey, this is Chris, the Business Doctor.
We're on
Catch my
Facebook, so
show,
we
The
have to
Business
say
Doctor,
goodbye.
every Friday from 11 a.m.
Oh.
to 12 p.m. On my
You
show,
can take it off.
you're
Goodbye,
able to hear
Facebook.
the
They're
insights
still watching us
of
right now,
business
so I
and
used to
medicine.
always do
Finally
this.
learn
I
how to
didn't do
save
this.
money on your
Trevor
next
can
doctor
fix
bill.
this. I'm
Tune in
going to
every
do a
Friday
little
from
dance
11 a.m. to
before we
12
get off
p.m.
because when I
on
do my
Blue
Twitter
Street.
video, I like to have a dance.
Radio
Really?
Network.
So if you could show us a little dance.
Jump in.
It's like,
Yeah.
that's the dance right there. Ooh.
We made it so easy to listen to our
Bye,
show.
Facebook.
Even a child can log in. Now forget about